a human engineer inherits the largest warship in the galaxy and freezes the moment he steps aboard. His life was ordinary, predictable, and comfortable enough. He repaired old cargo ships, fixed malfunctioning drones, and sometimes helped local miners optimize their excavation equipment. People in the colony knew him as reliable, clever, and quiet, someone who could solve almost any technical problem without asking for much in return. Yet, despite the steady rhythm of his life, Adrian often felt that there was more waiting for him out there. Something beyond the dusty streets of Taurus 7, beyond the hum of machinery, beyond the safe routine of his work. He could never have imagined just how abruptly that something would find him. It all began on a slow morning. Adrian was hunched over a broken hover transporter in his small workshop, the smell of solder and oil hanging in the air. His hands moved instinctively, tightening bolts and connecting circuits, when a sharp chime interrupted the quiet. It was not the usual call from a client or an automated message from the colony office. This was different. A formal notification carried through the Galactic transmission network, a channel reserved for official and highly important matters. Adrian wiped his hands on a rag, unsure why his heart had suddenly started beating faster. He tapped the small, hollow screen, and a three-dimensional emblem materialized before him. It was the crest of the Interstellar fleet, a fleet he had only read about in history books and seen in faded photographs. The emblem shimmered with polished silver lines, intricate and commanding. Below it, a message scrolled in formal letters. Adrian Cole, you have been named the sole inheritor of the vessel Dread Sovereign, largest warship in the known galaxy. Proceed to docking station Alpha for further instructions. Adrian stared, blinking several times. He felt the world shrink and expand at the same time. The Dread Sovereign, the largest warship. It sounded impossible. How could someone like him, a simple engineer from a quiet colony, suddenly inherit something of such scale and importance? His mind raced. He had read stories of the admiral who once commanded the ship, a distant relative who had perished decades ago, but he had assumed that all of that belonged to history now. And yet, here it was, calling to him. He shook his head and leaned back, trying to calm the whirlwind of thoughts. Maybe it was a mistake. Perhaps the message was a scam, a bureaucratic error, something that could be dismissed with a simple reply. Yet deep down, he felt a curious pull, a sense of destiny tugging at him. He remembered the stories his father had told him when he was a child, tales of great ships and brave captains, of galaxies explored and battles fought. He had never imagined that one day, a story like that would become his reality. Adrian decided he had no choice but to follow the instructions. That evening he packed lightly, a set of tools, a few personal belongings, and his digital pad filled with notes about engineering techniques and starship schematics. He stepped onto the transport shuttle that would take him to docking station Alpha, feeling a mixture of excitement and unease. Every jolt of the shuttle, every flash of the stars outside the small window made his heart pound faster. He could not stop thinking about the enormity of what lay ahead. Upon arrival at the docking station, Adrian was met by an official in uniform, someone whose expression balanced respect and caution. "Welcome, Mr. Cole," the officer said, extending a hand. "The vessel awaits your inspection. Please follow me." The walk to the docking bay felt unreal. The station itself was vast, a miniature city orbiting above Taurus 7, with docking bays stacked like layers of a giant cake. Engineers and technicians moved in precise patterns, their suits glinting under the harsh lights. As they approached the final bay, Adrian caught his first glimpse of the Dread Sovereign. The sight was breathtaking. Even from a distance, the warship seemed almost alive. Its hull stretched like a colossal shadow against the dark expanse of space. Lights blinked along its edges, and the surface shimmered with alloys that reflected the distant stars. Adrian felt a lump in his throat. He had repaired ships half its size and twice its complexity, yet this was beyond anything he had imagined. It was not just a ship, it was a floating city, a fortress, and a machine of incredible power. He stepped closer, and the floor under him hummed softly as the ship's docking interface welcomed him. Adrian's legs felt heavy. He could hardly believe he would be setting foot on the vessel that had once commanded fleets, participated in battles that had shaped entire sectors, and held secrets no human had touched for decades. The officer handed him a small device, a universal access key that would allow him to interface with the ship's systems. "The vessel is mostly dormant," the officer explained. "Life support is minimal, propulsion systems are offline, and security protocols remain active. Proceed carefully. You are now its master, Mr. Cole. The legacy is yours to manage." Adrian nodded, swallowing hard. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. His life as a simple engineer seemed to vanish in an instant. He took a deep breath and activated the access key. A panel slid open in the hull, revealing a staircase wide enough for 5 people to walk side by side. The interior of the ship glowed with dim lights, highlighting metallic surfaces and corridors that stretched farther than his eyes could follow. Every step he took felt monumental. Adrian's mind raced, cataloging every detail: the hum of the dormant engines, the faint scent of machine oil that lingered from decades of operation, the cold, metallic air that carried a history heavier than any library. He moved cautiously, yet with a sense of wonder, as if each corridor whispered stories of the past. He entered what seemed to be the main atrium, a chamber so large it reminded him of the central plaza in Taurus 7 capital. Massive support columns reached upward, disappearing into darkness above. Lights shimmered along the walls, highlighting panels, screens, and consoles that seemed both ancient and futuristic. Adrian stopped. He could not move for several seconds. He simply stood there, frozen, letting the magnitude of the moment sink in. It was more than just the size or the technology. It was the history, the lives, the decisions that had been made here. He imagined admirals giving orders, engineers racing to repair damage during combat, and crews walking these corridors in the quiet moments between battles. He felt like a ghost stepping into the heart of a living legacy. When he finally moved again, it was with careful steps. He began inspecting the nearest systems, running basic diagnostics with the access key. The ship's AI, dormant for years, stirred to life, its voice calm but resonant. "Welcome, Adrian Cole," it said. "I am Soterian, the vessel's operational AI, access protocols verified." "Please state your intent," Adrian swallowed. I'm here to learn," he said, his voice sounding small in the cavernous space. "To understand the ship, to make it functional again." Soterian responded with quiet confirmation, its tone neutral but acknowledging. "Acknowledged. Assistance available. The vessel requires extensive maintenance before full operation can be restored. Critical systems offline. Life support minimal. Ship mass and dimensions noted. Proceed with caution." Adrian nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. The ship was massive, older than most engineers would dare to approach, and yet here he was, expected to master it. He moved deeper into the corridors, examining engine chambers, storage bays, and maintenance tunnels. Everything was massive, intricate, and intimidating. Even the simplest panel seemed like a city of circuits. Yet Adrian noticed details others might have missed: worn connectors that could cause malfunctions, hydraulic systems needing recalibration, and cooling conduits that had been neglected. Hours passed like minutes. Adrian's mind raced with plans. How he would repair the engines, how he would test the navigation systems, how he might slowly bring the dread Sovereign back to life. At the same time, he could not shake a feeling of responsibility heavier than any machinery he had ever worked on. This was not just a project. It was a legacy, a story, and a responsibility that had been handed to him in an instant. As the first day aboard the ship drew to a close, Adrian found a small observation deck near the bridge. From here, he could see the galaxy stretching endlessly, stars twinkling, planets orbiting in quiet arcs. He sat down, exhausted yet unable to rest completely. His mind replayed every detail of the ship, every panel, every hum, every corridor. He realized that this was only the beginning. The dread Sovereign was no longer a relic of the past. It was a challenge, a responsibility, and now his home. Adrian closed his eyes for a moment, letting the silence of space and the gentle hum of the dormant warship fill his senses. He knew that life as he had known it was over. In its place was a new life, one of exploration, problem-solving, and stewardship over a machine larger and more complex than any human mind could fully grasp. Yet, despite fear and uncertainty, a spark of exhilaration ignited within him. For the first time, Adrian felt the pull of destiny not as a distant story, but as a living, breathing reality. Adrian woke early the next day, the vast silence of the dread Sovereign filling the observation deck like a living presence. Sunlight streaming through the ship's hull was replaced by the faint glow of distant stars. But even in this artificial twilight, the immensity of the vessel struck him. Every corridor seemed to stretch farther than the eye could see. Every panel and console whispered secrets of a past life that he was only beginning to uncover. He realized that this day marked the start of a journey unlike any he had ever experienced, a journey into the heart of a machine that had once controlled fleets and shaped battles across the galaxy. Adrian decided to explore systematically. He began with the main atrium again, moving carefully along the polished floors that seemed to reflect the hum of the ship itself. The walls were lined with panels that displayed faint traces of data, echoes of operations long past. He ran his hands along the metal surfaces, noting the wear, the slight scratches, the small signs of repair work done decades ago. Each detail told a story, and Adrian felt like an archaeologist discovering the layers of a forgotten civilization. As he walked, he came across the first signs of automation still functioning. Service drones hovered silently along the corridors, their small lights blinking in a steady rhythm. They seemed almost curious, inspecting Adrian as he passed. He had repaired drones like these countless times before, but here they felt alive, aware of the presence of someone new aboard. Adrian reached out, touching one gently, and it paused, hovering near his hand before continuing its tasks. A small smile crossed his face. In a way, the ship was already welcoming him, acknowledging him as part of its ongoing story. The engineer continued deeper into the vessel, entering the maintenance tunnels. These narrow passages twisted and turned, lined with conduits, wires, and pipes of every shape and size. He crouched to examine a panel that controlled the cooling system, noting that some valves were corroded and needed immediate attention. Adrian felt a familiar rush of focus. This was what he knew best, what he loved most. Even in the midst of overwhelming scale, the mechanics and systems spoke to him in a language he could understand. Each broken connection, each rusted bolt, was a puzzle waiting to be solved. Eventually, Adrian arrived at the engine chamber. The size of the room made him pause. The engines were massive, stretching far beyond what he could see from the entrance. Pipes and conduits coiled around like vines, pulsing faintly with residual energy. The hum of dormant power vibrated through the floor, and Adrian felt it deep in his chest. He walked slowly along the walkways, touching surfaces, scanning displays, and running diagnostics. Some systems were stable, others barely functional, and a few were completely offline. The sheer scope of what needed repair made his head spin, but he felt a thrill instead of fear. This was the kind of challenge he had dreamed of, though he had never imagined it would be so real. As he moved, Adrian noticed the history embedded in the ship. Scars from battles, small dents along the hull, repaired panels. Each told a story of survival, strategy, and human effort. He could almost see the crews working tirelessly during long campaigns, hear the hum of engines during hyperdrive jumps, feel the tension in the corridors as orders were given and executed. The ship was more than a machine. It was a living archive of its own history. Adrian felt the weight of that legacy pressing down on him, a reminder that he was not merely exploring, he was inheriting responsibility. By midday, Adrian reached the bridge. The vast control room was awe-inspiring. Rows of consoles, holographic displays, and navigation systems stretched in every direction. At the center stood the captain's chair, a throne of authority that had once been the command point for fleets. Adrian approached cautiously, running his hands over the controls. The AI interface flickered, recognizing his presence. "Welcome, Adrian Cole," Soterian said again. "Access granted, all critical systems in standby, life support nominal, ship logs available for review." Adrian paused in the center of the bridge, taking in the room. The viewports offered a panoramic view of the galaxy outside, stars and planets scattered across the dark expanse. He could imagine the ship moving through the void at incredible speed, engines glowing, weapons ready, a floating fortress commanding respect across light years. For a long moment, he simply stood there, unable to move, frozen by the scale and grandeur of it all. It was not fear that held him. It was awe, the overwhelming realization of what he had inherited and the responsibility it entailed. After a while, he began exploring the bridge's systems. Navigation, propulsion, weapons control, communications, all were dormant, waiting for someone to awaken them. Adrian ran diagnostics, noting which systems could be brought online quickly and which would require extensive repair. He found old star charts, battle logs, and personal notes from previous commanders. The records were detailed, offering insight into both technical operations and the human decisions that had shaped them. Adrian read through them carefully, fascinated by the combination of strategy, science, and human will. As he continued, Adrian encountered the crew quarters. Though mostly unoccupied, they offered glimpses into the lives of those who had lived aboard the ship. Personal items, photographs, and small decorations suggested that even in a warship of such scale, life continued with its ordinary moments. Adrian felt a connection to these people, understanding that the vessel was not just a tool for battle. It had been a home, a workplace, a place where people had dreamed, loved, and struggled. He walked slowly through the quarters, imagining the daily routines, the quiet conversations, the laughter and the stress that had filled the space. Hours passed, and Adrian moved through storage bays, medical facilities, and training areas. Every compartment added to the picture of the ship as a self-contained world. He marveled at the engineering ingenuity, the sheer scale of planning, and the complexity required to maintain life and function across such a massive vessel. Each step reinforced the realization that this was no ordinary inheritance. He had become the steward of a vast, living machine, responsible not just for its mechanics, but for the legacy it carried and the people who had served on it. By evening, Adrian found himself back in the main atrium, exhausted but exhilarated. He paused near a balcony overlooking the lower decks, taking a moment to breathe. The ship's lights shimmered softly, casting long shadows across the metal surfaces. The hum of dormant engines resonated faintly beneath his feet. Adrian felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. He had walked through corridors where no one had stepped in decades, touched controls that had directed fleets, and begun to understand the magnitude of the task before him. He took out his digital pad and began to make notes, carefully documenting every observation, every potential repair, every concern. He realized that restoring the ship would take time, patience, and skill far beyond what he had imagined. Yet he also felt a spark of determination. This was his chance to make a difference, to honor the past while shaping the future. He could feel the weight of history and responsibility pressing down, but he also felt a surge of possibility. The Dread Sovereign was not just a machine. It was a new beginning, and he was at the center of it. As night fell aboard the ship, Adrian found a quiet corner near one of the observation decks. The stars outside seemed to stretch infinitely, reflecting off the polished surfaces of the ship. He sat, letting the silence fill him, thinking of the path ahead. There would be repairs, decisions, and challenges beyond anything he had faced before. But for the first time, he also felt a sense of purpose and belonging. The Dread Sovereign was no longer a relic of the past. It was a part of his life now, and he would face whatever came with courage and ingenuity. Adrian closed his eyes, taking one last moment to absorb the immensity around him. The ship hummed gently, a living testament to human ingenuity and history. And in that quiet moment, he realized that he had taken the first step toward mastering not just the technology, but the legacy of the greatest warship in the galaxy. The next morning, Adrian awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. The Dread Sovereign no longer felt like just a giant machine. It had begun to feel like a living entity, full of history, memory, and quiet expectation. He had walked its corridors, studied its systems, and touched the remnants of countless generations of crew. But today, he would dive deeper. Today, he would start learning the ship's legacy, not just its mechanics, but the stories, decisions, and principles that had guided its actions across the galaxy. Adrian began with the bridge, where the ship's AI, Soterian, waited patiently. Its calm voice resonated throughout the room. "Good morning, Adrian Cole. Are you prepared to access historical logs and operational records?" Adrian nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. "Yes, Soterian. I want to understand everything. I need to know what this ship was and what it can become." "Understood," the AI replied. "I will provide comprehensive logs, including technical records, battle reports, and personal entries from former commanders and crew members. Access requires careful attention, as some material may challenge personal beliefs and ethics." Adrian swallowed. He knew that this inheritance was more than a technical challenge. It was also moral and emotional. A warship of this scale was designed for power and destruction. Understanding its legacy meant confronting the consequences of that power. Yet he felt ready. He had to be. The first set of logs he accessed were technical, detailing systems he had already begun exploring. These were fascinating but straightforward. Power flow diagrams, propulsion diagnostics, and weapon system schematics sprawled across the holographic displays. Adrian traced the lines of energy through the engines and across the hull, noting where patterns, past repairs, and design improvements. He could almost feel the engineers from decades past, their hands working tirelessly to maintain perfection in the face of immense pressure. But as he moved deeper into the archives, Adrian encountered something far more human: personal journals and battle logs written by his late relative, the admiral who had commanded the dread sovereign. The entries were candid, often reflecting doubts, hopes, and fears. One log described a battle where the fleet had been outnumbered, but managed a clever maneuver to avoid heavy losses. Another detailed the decisions made when civilian ships were in danger, highlighting the delicate balance between military objectives and ethical responsibility. Adrian read each entry carefully, absorbing the thought process behind every decision. He realized that commanding such a vessel was not merely a matter of engineering or strategy. It was a matter of judgment, ethics, and humanity. Every choice had consequences. Every command affected lives, sometimes thousands of them at a time. He felt a shiver of awe and respect. He paused to reflect. The ship was more than a weapon. It was a record of human decisions, of courage and mistakes, of moments of brilliance and moments of regret. Adrian understood that inheriting the dread sovereign meant inheriting all of this: its power, its history, and its moral weight. After hours in the archives, Adrian decided to explore the ship's operational systems in parallel. He moved from the bridge to the engineering deck, where the dormant engines awaited him. The scale was daunting. Even with his experience, he felt the enormity of the challenge pressing on him. He ran diagnostics, noting which systems could be brought online quickly and which required careful repair. The AI assisted, offering guidance on sequence and safety protocols, yet allowing Adrian full control over every decision. As he worked, Soterian shared historical context, explaining how the engines had been used in past missions, how power had been distributed during long journeys, and how failures had been handled. Adrian listened attentively, amazed at the combination of engineering and history intertwined in every system. It became clear that the ship's design reflected not only technology, but the lessons learned from decades of service. Every pipe, every circuit, every conduit had a story. By midday, Adrian reached the communication hub. Here, he could access records of diplomatic transmissions, fleet coordination, and tactical commands. As he scrolled through the logs, he realized that the dread sovereign had played a critical role in maintaining peace and order across several sectors. Yet, he also saw evidence of conflict, mistakes, and decisions that had led to loss. The duality of the ship's legacy was stark. Immense power could be used to protect or destroy, to help or harm. Adrian felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. The moral questions became unavoidable. Adrian had the ability to control this vessel, but what should he do with it? Should he continue the legacy of a warship, maintaining its original purpose, or should he chart a new course, one focused on exploration, protection, or humanitarian aid? He knew there were factions in the galaxy who would see the ship as a tool for conquest, but he also felt the possibility of guiding it towards something greater, something beyond its original intent. As he wrestled with these questions, Adrian decided to consult the AI for perspective. "Soterian," he said, "how do I honor the ship's past while making it my own? How do I ensure that power is used responsibly?" The AI's voice was calm, almost comforting. Legacy and responsibility are intertwined. Historical data indicate that careful decision-making, ethical evaluation, and strategic foresight lead to sustainable outcomes. You may choose the path of operation. The ship will support your decisions, provided they are executed with technical precision and mindful oversight. Adrian nodded, feeling a mixture of reassurance and challenge. The ship was neutral, capable, and patient, waiting for him to define its purpose. He realized that this journey was not only technical but personal. He would have to reconcile the lessons of the past with his own values and vision for the future. After a brief rest, Adrian moved to the training and crew quarters, hoping to gain a better understanding of the people who had served aboard the ship. Even though most rooms were empty, he discovered personal items, photos, and recordings. One recording featured a crew member describing daily life aboard the vessel, their pride in their work, and their dedication to each other. Another recording showed a small celebration after a successful mission, laughter and music filling the metallic corridors. Adrian felt a strong connection to these lives. The ship was not merely steel and circuits, it was a home, a workplace, and a community. Inspired, Adrian decided to test some of the life support systems. Using the AI's guidance, he brought certain modules online, restoring air circulation, temperature control, and environmental monitoring in key areas. It was a small victory, but it filled him with confidence. He was learning, adapting, and beginning to master the ship. He realized that the Dread Sovereign would respond to his attention, care, and understanding, just as any living system might. Hours passed quickly. Adrian moved through corridors, chambers, and decks, inspecting systems, analyzing data, and making plans for the extensive repairs ahead. He found himself thinking not just like an engineer but like a steward, a custodian of history and technology. He understood that his role was far greater than he had ever imagined. He was not just repairing a ship, he was shaping its future. As evening approached, Adrian returned to the bridge. He activated the ship's main viewports, observing the galaxy beyond. Stars twinkled in distant constellations, planets rotated silently, and asteroid fields drifted across the void. In the quiet, he reflected on everything he had learned that day: the technical systems, the history, the lives of those who had served aboard, and the moral implications of power. He felt both overwhelmed and exhilarated. The Dread Sovereign was a world unto itself, and he was now at its center. For a long time, he simply sat in the captain's chair, imagining the possibilities, considering the responsibilities, and feeling the profound weight of legacy. He realized that mastering the ship would require not just skill but wisdom, patience, and judgment. The next steps would be challenging, but he felt ready. Finally, Adrian made a decision. He would honor the past while charting his own path. He would learn, repair, and explore. He would ensure that the Dread Sovereign was a force for good, guided by human ingenuity, ethics, and compassion. The ship had given him a chance that few could imagine, and he intended to live up to that opportunity. As he prepared to rest, Adrian reflected on the day's discoveries. He had uncovered history, faced moral questions, and taken his first steps toward understanding the ship. He felt a sense of pride, responsibility, and determination. The Dread Sovereign was no longer just a relic of war. It was a living testament to human potential and the choices that shape history. And Adrian Cole, a simple engineer from a small colony, had become its steward, ready to face the challenges ahead. The following morning, Adrian woke with renewed determination. Over the past days, he had explored the vast corridors of the Dread Sovereign, studied its history, and begun understanding the responsibilities of his inheritance. Now he knew it was time to take the next step, to bring the ship closer to life and to test his ability to manage the systems he had learned so carefully. The magnitude of the task was daunting, but Adrian felt more prepared than ever. He started with the bridge, walking deliberately through the wide corridors that led to the captain's chair. The AI, Soterian, had become more familiar, a calm voice guiding him but never taking control. "Good morning, Adrian Cole," it said. "Shall we begin the activation sequence for the primary systems?" Adrian nodded. "Yes, Soterian. Let's start with propulsion, life support, and navigation. We will test one system at a time." As he moved through the consoles, activating systems carefully, the hum of the ship seemed to grow louder, as if it were responding to his presence. Power coursed through circuits that had been dormant for decades. Life support systems stabilized, and the air became fresher in the areas that had been sealed for so long. Adrian felt a thrill of satisfaction. Step by step, he was restoring life to a vessel that had been silent for years. Next, he tackled the propulsion system. The engines were massive and complex, more advanced than any ship he had worked on before. He checked each module, testing the connections, calibrating controls, and ensuring that all safety protocols were in place. The AI assisted, providing precise instructions and historical context, but every decision rested with Adrian. He felt a deep sense of responsibility, knowing that even a small mistake could have major consequences. Hours passed as Adrian methodically worked through the systems. At first, he focused purely on the technical aspects, ensuring that everything functioned correctly. Then, as he gained confidence, he began to think strategically. The ship was not just a collection of engines and circuits. It was a tool, a guardian, a legacy. How it would be used depended entirely on the choices he made. As the day went on, Adrian noticed a new message appearing on the AI interface. It was from a galactic council, distant officials who had learned about the reactivation of the Dread Sovereign. They requested his immediate attention and guidance. Some of the messages hinted at potential political pressure, others were inquiries about the ship's purpose. Adrian realized that his decisions would now have consequences beyond the vessel itself. He took a deep breath and activated the communication console. A holographic projection appeared, displaying several council representatives. Their expressions were a mix of curiosity, caution, and expectation. "Adrian Cole," one of them began, "the galaxy has watched the Dread Sovereign for decades. Its activation raises questions. How do you intend to use such power?" Adrian met their gaze firmly. "This ship is no longer a weapon of war," he said. "I intend to use it for exploration, research, and protection. I will honor the legacy of its crew, but I will ensure it serves humanity responsibly." The representatives exchanged glances, some skeptical, others impressed. "It is rare for one person to assume command of such a vessel with such clarity," another said. "We will observe your actions closely. May your decisions reflect wisdom and integrity." After the council projection ended, Adrian felt the weight of responsibility more keenly than ever. He knew that others would watch his choices, that he would face challenges from those who sought to use the ship for less noble purposes. Yet he also felt confident in his own abilities and judgment. The Dread Sovereign was now fully in his hands, and he intended to guide it wisely. As evening approached, Adrian returned to the engine chamber. He decided to conduct a controlled test of the propulsion system, bringing one module online at a time. The engines vibrated gently as power flowed through them, their dormant energy awakening under his careful supervision. He felt a surge of pride as the ship responded perfectly to his commands. Each hum, each pulse of energy, was a reminder that he was now the master of the galaxy's largest warship. He paused for a moment to reflect. Over the past days, he had gone from a simple engineer on a quiet colony to the steward of a vessel of immense power. He had explored its corridors, studied its history, and begun understanding its systems. Now, he was not only maintaining the ship but guiding its future. He realized that true mastery required more than technical skill. It required wisdom, judgment, and moral clarity. Adrian decided to take a walk through the lower decks. The corridors, once silent and empty, now hummed faintly with energy. Lights glowed softly, and systems that had been offline began to show activity. He passed crew quarters, medical bays, and training areas, imagining the lives that had once filled these spaces. For the first time, he truly felt connected to the people who had served on the ship, understanding that it was not just steel and circuits, but a home, a workplace, and a community. As he walked, he thought about the future. There were countless possibilities for the Dread Sovereign. He could explore uncharted regions of the galaxy, assist colonies in need, conduct scientific research, or provide a safe haven for those in danger. The choices were vast and the responsibility immense. Yet Adrian felt a sense of excitement and determination. He had the skill, the knowledge, and the moral compass to guide this incredible vessel toward a meaningful purpose. That night, Adrian returned to the bridge and activated the main viewports. The galaxy stretched endlessly before him, stars shining like scattered diamonds, planets rotating silently, and distant nebulae glowing with color. He sat in the captain's chair, feeling a sense of awe unlike anything he had experienced before. The Dread Sovereign was no longer just a ship. It was a part of him, and he was a part of it. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a simple engineer on Taurus 7 to the master of the largest warship in the galaxy, his life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. Yet he understood that this was only the beginning. The ship's systems would require constant attention, its missions would demand careful planning, and its legacy would always remind him of the importance of responsibility. As he prepared to rest, Adrian felt a sense of clarity. He had faced the technical challenges, learned the history, considered the moral implications, and begun guiding the ship toward a new purpose. The dread sovereign was awake, alive with potential, and ready to serve under his careful stewardship. He knew that the days ahead would bring challenges, but he felt prepared, confident, and determined. In the quiet of the bridge, Adrian closed his eyes and allowed himself a moment of reflection. He remembered the first time he had stepped aboard the ship, the awe that had frozen him in the main atrium. Now that feeling was different. It was no longer fear or uncertainty. It was a deep, steady awareness of purpose and responsibility. He had embraced the legacy of the dread sovereign, and he was ready to write the next chapter of its story. Over the following days, Adrian continued his work, gradually bringing more systems online, refining controls and planning missions. He coordinated with the AI, testing each function carefully, ensuring that everything worked smoothly. As he mastered each aspect of the ship, he also reflected on the lessons he had learned. The importance of careful decision-making, the responsibility of power, and the need to balance history with vision. The ship responded to his guidance, its dormant energy now fully aware of its new steward. Adrian could feel the pulse of life within the vessel, the hum of engines, the flicker of lights, the subtle movements of automated systems. He walked its corridors confidently, knowing that he was no longer just an observer but an active participant in its story. Finally, Adrian decided it was time for the first major test, a short journey beyond the orbit of Taurus 7. He carefully planned the course, calculated energy requirements, and ensured that all safety systems were fully operational. With a deep breath, he activated the engines, feeling the vibration of power beneath his feet as the dread sovereign lifted from the docking bay. As the ship moved gracefully into space, Adrian felt a sense of exhilaration and fulfillment. The stars stretched around him, distant planets glimmered, and the galaxy opened up in endless possibilities. He realized that he was no longer just an engineer or a caretaker. He was a leader, a guardian, and a visionary. The dread sovereign was alive, and he was guiding it toward a future full of promise. Adrian looked out over the galaxy, feeling a profound connection to the ship, its history, and the vast universe beyond. He knew that challenges would come, that decisions would be difficult, and that the weight of responsibility would never fully lift. Yet he also knew that he was ready. With skill, wisdom, and determination, he would ensure that the dread sovereign served a purpose greater than war, becoming a symbol of human ingenuity, ethics, and courage. In that moment, Adrian Cole, once a simple engineer on a quiet colony, felt the full weight and glory of his new life. The dread sovereign was more than a machine. It was history, potential, and hope. And he was ready to embrace every aspect of it, confident that he could shape its story, guide its power responsibly, and explore the galaxy with a sense of purpose that honored both the past and the future.